they said, well, who is Sam Walker? And then when they found out it's Mr. Walker, they knew who Mr. Walker was. Because he taught the agriculture classes at El Cap for 30 years, right?
Close to.
But before that, he grew up on the dairy over there where the drive-in theater is at Santee. So he's the Walker Dairy family. And then weren't there two different Walker dairies?
Well, Ed Walker had a dairy over here on Riverport and Lakeside where they came together, but no relation.
So, and now that he's retired from teaching, he is the chairman of the Stadium Association and rodeos. So he's a busy man.
It's when you go to a meeting and you show up and all of a sudden they turn around and say you're president. And that's basically how that happened, type of thing. So, and it's been rewarding. It's a challenge. We're dealing with about 25 different personalities over there, so to speak. But that's another story. We'll get to that later. I understand your meetings go for about 20 to 30 minutes with a guest speaker. If I'm going too long, just tell me, and we'll stop with that. I actually went back and did some research. Didn't know Billy was going to be here taking pictures. But the Walkers have been in the county for quite a while. My great-grandfather was F.B. Walker, and he was born in 1860 in Worcester, England. Actually came through Ellis Island about 1880. Had some cousins over in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that must have promised him a job. So he went over there, we figure about, somewhere around 1880, 1881, and married a lady down in Sioux City, Iowa. In 1883, the oldest Walker was born in Mitchell, South Dakota, and another Walker, Lucille, was born up in Ipswich. And in 1887, they decided they had enough of South Dakota, so they covered wagons and came all the way to San Diego. And I think he was a printer by trade. I'm kind of the fourth generation, and by the time you get down to my generation, the stories kind of change a little bit. Printer by trade. And my grandfather was born in San Diego in 1891. Another sibling was born down there. And as the story goes, in 1894, he got into a poker game. And it was a sizable pot. And he won. And he took that money, and it was enough money to move the family up to Alpine. So if you know where Willow Road is in Alpine, there was actually a farmstead there called the Willows. And that was where my great-grandfather settled into in 1894. So the family was up in the Willows, and the next three children were born up there. If you know Jim Dyer, Shirley Dyer is a Walker, and her father was born there, and Doogie was born there. And it was a farm. In 1894, they, of course, milked cows, and they had the fruits and the vegetables. And of course, the only place they could get supplies at was in Lakeside. So they send a team of horses with a buckboard down about every weekend or every other weekend because they had cream to sell, that type of thing. And what happened is up there at the Willows, it was on the stage route. So it was actually a stage stop in the 1890s. And as the kids got a little bit older into the 1900s, the Stanley steamers could not make it up the hill when they were going to the valley. So they would send a team down to get the people and bring them up to the Willows, and they would go back and drag the Stanley steamer up. So it actually started to become a resort. And in 1915, it was quite a resort. A lot of people came out of San Diego to participate and enjoy the Willows as a resort. My grandfather at the time as with a lot of the families back then, they had an 8th grade education. And of course, the mines were opened up in Julian, and they actually were teamsters. They ran the freight wagons up to Julian and back down. And of course, they did an 8th grade education, so by the time they were 14, they were out on their own. Well, I knew that he had a dairy down in the Imperial Valley, so I took an afternoon one day and I went down and went through all of the records in the Imperial Valley, and I found where the dairy was out on Valker and Chick Road. As the story goes, he was milking cows down there about 1915, 1916, and down in Imperial Valley they were all 40-acre farms down there, and they all milked cows, and they all sold the cream. They didn't even have milking barns. They just milked in the lot, and they separated the cream, and that's how they sold it, and that's how they got their income for that. Well, he was down there milking his cows about 1916 or so, and he had a propane stove inside of the building, inside of his home, and those old propane stoves, I actually saw one at a tractor show over at Seguro Ranch in Arizona, which was the propane stove from that era, 1915, 1916. It caught on fire. It was going to burn his house down. So the only way that he could save his house was to grab the stove and take it outside. In the process, he burned his hands. And you can't milk cows if you got burned hands. So he came back to the Willows, sent his brother Doogie down there to milk cows, and it just happened that a family had come out of San Diego to enjoy the weekend, and there was a family there where there was a widow with a child, and her name was Marie Mason Stokes. And they met, and love bloomed, and he was 26 and she was 35, and they ended up marrying. And for some reason, beyond me, why would somebody want to go all the way down to Imperial Valley from San Diego and live down there? But they moved down in 1917 on that farm, and the kids were born down there, Fred and Evelyn and my dad, Bevan, 1921, and 1923. Well, fortunately, Marie Mason Stokes, there was some money on that side of the family, because there was no money on the Walker side. We were just pretty much poor. And she inherited some money, and she wanted to come back up. So in 1926, they came over to Santee, and they bought 30 acres over there, which was the Stevens alfalfa fields. And then as time went on, and there was some more money that came into the family from some bachelor uncles up in New York, they bought an additional 300 acres. So we spanned from Highway 67 at Woodside Avenue by the Santee Drive-In Theater, and we owned all of the river bottom from River Ford, and including the RCP plant. And then we had another 100 acres on the other side of the river that we farmed to just about over to Mass Boulevard. So that's where the family moved to, and that's where everybody was raised. Well, my uncle went to vet school at Kansas State University. My Aunt Evelyn, who was a real character, she went to Cal in 1939 in Berkeley and became a CPA, which is unheard of for a woman to do back in that era. She was also, as I went to her when she passed and my cousins were down, she always kept a house over on the old farm. I found out that she was the Lakeside Rodeo Queen from 1939 as a high school senior at high school, so I thought that was interesting. But she was a tough old lady. She straightened out the Santee City Council a number of times over there. And